2024 was a great year for games, and I was pretty successful chipping away at the backlog, playing a lot of new releases, and even spending some time replaying some of my favorite games. But with the new year here in 2025, I wanted to make sure I took some time to reflect on the year that was, think about the year ahead, and make some goals for myself as it relates to this hobby coming in to 2025. But hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, that's exactly what we are going to do. I'm going to take you through what I ended up playing in 2024, a little quick just snapshot to see how many games I beat and the types of games I was playing. And then I want to take you through my goals here in 2025. And I'm taking a little bit of an interesting approach this year. And normally it's kind of just, let's just try and beat as many games as I can, play a lot of new releases, chip away at the backlog. But one of the themes from last year for me, and really the past several years, I would say, is I get myself into this decision paralysis. Maybe I play the newest and greatest game, and then there's a lull between new releases, and then I look at this shelf back behind me, and I'll just stare. I'll look at old games, I'll look at newer games, everything in between, and I cannot make a decision. And it's like watching and scrolling Netflix. I end up spending more time scrolling through my library of games, digitally and physical copies, and I just cannot make a decision. And sometimes I'll put games on my console, I'll maybe put an hour in, I'll move on to another game, and I just can't really seem to stick with and make a decision on what I play next. So over the course of this video, I'm going to talk through some of my goals, and the goals that I'm going to share aren't necessarily with the intention of, I want to try and set records this year and beat 50 plus games. The reasons that I made these goals in particular is to kind of provide some semblance of structure for myself so that I don't get caught in this spinning phase where I just don't know what to play. I come up here, I stare at the shelf, and I don't know what to play next. So I built out this list of games and kind of the theme surrounding it, as we'll get into here shortly, with that idea in mind of like, let's create healthier habits as it relates to selecting and playing and sticking with games. And hopefully that will translate to me continuing to chip away at the backlog while also giving myself that freedom to buy and play new releases as well. Now, before we get into the 2025 specific goals, let's shift gears just a little bit and I'll take you through kind of the spreadsheet that I've maintained ever since I started my podcast with my brother-in-law, Otaku Brothers, back in 2018. I use this spreadsheet to kind of make notes for myself of the videos that I want to do for YouTube going forward, but also to chronicle all the games that I play throughout the year, and I'll kind of make some notes for myself as to, once I finish that game, is it a potential Game of the Year candidate? How much time did I spend playing that game? Things like that, and then we'll shift back to some of the goals. So we'll kind of jump in here and make sure that you can kind of see me okay, which you can. I'll kind of move myself ever so slightly down there. And I ended up putting a filter on this with a Chrome extension so it's not like blinding people, especially if you're watching this late at night or you have me on the big screen while you're playing some games. Hopefully this finds you well here in the new year, and this is meant to be more podcast in nature. This is going to be a super quick video where I'm just clipping through gameplay footage. I want to take my time and kind of take you on a journey as to the types of games that I play, how I make note of them over the course of the year, and again, as we'll get to here shortly, my goals for 2025. But as you can see, this is just a simple Google spreadsheet where I kind of chronicle the game I beat, the system I beat it on, the month I beat it, the year that that game was originally released, the genre, and then whether or not it's a top 10 Game of the Year contender. If you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you might know that for my Game of the Year, when I'm building out that list of 10 games, I don't limit myself to just year of release games because I rarely end up beating 10 games in a given year. And so I want to kind of allow myself, what are the 10 best games I play in a given year, regardless of when they originally released. And so I think you tend to kind of know and have a gut feeling whether or not a game is going to be a potential GOTY candidate. Is it going to make it in a top 10? Are we feeling more honorable mention territory? Or do we play a game and just know that, yeah, it's just not going to make the list? So something that's interesting to note is, and I actually have a video that I'm in the midst of working on now, talking about essentially giving yourself permission to replay some of your favorite games. And you can do that for a variety of different reasons, but stay tuned for that video because in 2024, I really gave myself permission to just replay some of my favorite games. Not worry about the backlog back there that I haven't beaten. Not worry about all the new releases that are coming out that I'm not picking up. Or even if I did pick up new games, I want to replay Tinykin. Replay it. I want to replay Dark Souls. Replay Dark Souls 3. The Wolfenstein games. I did that a lot in early 2024. And that's why you can see in some of those first few months, I only played and beat a few games. And I beat 5 games to start the year, and I didn't beat another game until May. Part of that was because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was so stinking long. But I was also just busy replaying Final Fantasy 15. Had no intentions of finishing it. I just wanted to jump back into that world and replay it. Not captured here. I replayed Dark Souls 1 Remastered. Got about 20 hours into that. Really enjoyed replaying that. So on and so forth. Allow yourself to replay your favorite games, okay? Make note of that. But anyways, some additional things that I keep track of is whether or not I got the Platinum Trophy, whether or not it was my first time playing it, and then the overall time it took to beat the game. So those are all the games that I beat over the course of the year. Ended up clocking in at 25 beats overall. And then over here, as you scroll further to the right, you'll see I'll start kind of making some mental notes of potential possible contenders for that Game of the Year list. I end up building out my list, spoiler alert if you haven't watched my Game of the Year video, and then some honorable mentions as well. So this is the spreadsheet that I use, and you can see I've done that for 2023, 2022, dating back to 2018, and then this yearly top 10 list captures my brother-in-law's top 10 games dating back to 2018, including my own. So a fun little spreadsheet to again, just make note of the games that you're playing and the games that you're beating. But we're going to dip back out here so I can talk through one of the kind of central goals that I have for myself here in 2025 when it comes to the games that I want to beat. And this is specifically focused on my backlog games. Of course, there's a lot of games that I want to play coming into this year. You can check out my most anticipated games for 2025, but the intent for this video and this list of games I'm going to talk through is just specific to the games that have been sitting on that shelf for probably too long. And so this first goal that I have for myself is 5 console games that I want to beat and 5 handheld games. And so there's different reasons for why I selected a lot of these games, but many of them are games that have been sitting on my shelf for a while, games that I've just been wanting to play for years in some instances, but all kind of anchoring back to that idea of when I play the latest and greatest game and I finish it and I want to play a game in my backlog between new releases, it gives me that structure of, hey, I know I want to beat these 10 games and I've been wanting to play these games for a long time. So it gives me that structure to say, okay, Rusty, pick from one of these 10s, one of these 10 games. It limits my options because 300, 400, 500 games is just tough to whittle it down to figure out what you want to play next. Maybe I'm on an island. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you struggle with decision paralysis when it comes to playing your backlog? I know I do. I have no shame in vocalizing that. But the 5 console games, the first one up is Super Mario Odyssey. The Switch 2, maybe it's already been revealed and shown by Nintendo by the time this video comes out, but I have way too much of my Switch backlog unplayed, including Super Mario Odyssey. Yes, one of my good friends here on YouTube has dubbed me the crown prince of platformers, 3D platformers specifically, and I've not finished Super Mario Odyssey. Put a couple hours into it, and I haven't finished it yet, so this is at the top of my list to play this year. An incredible game, we all know, but I tend to be drawn more towards those indie 3D platformers like Super Lucky's Tale and Tinykin, but it's time to play Super Mario Odyssey, so that's high on my list. A game I'm very deep and in the midst of now. I'm at about 90% finished with this one. Hogwarts Legacy. I actually just recorded a video that will come out probably a week after this one, sharing my thoughts and impressions. So I won't go too long. I pretty much talk about the game for 10 minutes in that video. Remarkable achievement in bringing the world of Harry Potter to life in this RPG. just an extraordinary game that I'm thoroughly enjoying my time with so far, and nearing the end of it. So I probably will end up beating this game in the next week or so. So starting off the year with a bang, certainly. Hogwarts Legacy, incredible game. Next up is Nier Replicants, a cult classic back on the Xbox 360 and PS3, originally just titled Nier, and then they ended up remaking it here, or remastering it with Nier Replicants. Another action RPG that I never played the original. I know it has quite a cult following and just an incredible soundtrack. And I hear that it is a little fetch questy in nature, but a very memorable story. So really want to play this one and knock it off the backlog this year. And this one is not one of those 60 to 80 hour RPGs. I've heard that you can beat this one in probably 20 to 30 hours, and you'll probably sense a theme with the games as we continue to make our way through here. I'm not looking to, again, set records or play these mammoth RPGs, but if I can continue to chip away at the backlog and knock some RPGs off the list, that's great. And Nier Replicant, I think, is a really great one to add to the list. So hoping to get to that this year. Now, next up is another RPG that I've been wanting to play for a really long time on the original Xbox, an early BioWare game, and that is Jade Empire. It's a really interesting game inspired by Chinese mythology, where I think you get to select from like one of 6 classes, and it's a real-time action RPG. You have all of the kind of traditional BioWare game mechanics with dialogue tree options when you're speaking to characters. There's a morality system, so based on the decisions you make in the game, the relationships that you build with certain characters affects whether or not you're kind of good versus evil. So kind of think early KOTOR, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. Like, this is where I think BioWare was really kind of finding their footing as a developer early on. And this is another RPG that you can beat in about 15 to 20 hours, depending on all of the side content that you do. But Chinese mythology, morality system, kind of a kung fu inspired action RPG. I've always had an interest in playing this one, and I've just never gotten around to playing it. And it's backwards compatible on Series X. And I think it also has a kind of an image upscaling. So kind of similar to Morrowind's, Oblivion, and some of those other games that are backwards compatible, I think it runs quite a bit smoother than it did on the original Xbox. So I just love backwards compatibility. I think with Switch 2, we'll certainly see it. I wish PlayStation was better with it, with the PlayStation 5, and even dating back to, like, if I could put a PlayStation 2 and 3 game into my PS5. How great would that be? So Xbox certainly has that going for them, with backwards compatibility as a great feature. But Jade Empire, have you played it? If so, what are your thoughts? Very much looking forward to popping this into my Series X and giving it a try at some point this year. And then last, certainly not least from a console perspective, is a retro game dating back to the Super Nintendo, the sequel to a game that I streamed, and there is a very infamous clip of me thinking I beat the final boss, but not actually beating the final boss. That is Donkey Kong Country 2. This is a Super Famicom version of a game that I picked up while I was in Japan. And I've really thought about not streaming this, but maybe recording myself playing it and uploading it to my YouTube channel, just because the first game was such a notorious, kind of historic stream for those that were there for it. I'm wondering if we could capture any of those types of moments if I ended up playing the sequel. But I'd love to continue to make my way through the Donkey Kong series, or Donkey Kong Country series. Such a legendary 2D platformer with David Wise, incredible soundtracks that have just stood the test of time, especially Aquatic Ambience, such a fantastic track. So looking forward to playing through this. I will most likely play through this on the Switch Online, but I do have a Retron 5, so I could always pop in the Super Famicom cart and play through it that way as well. All right, those are the 5 console games. Now we're shifting gears a little bit to the handheld games, and the first of which is on the GBA, a game that I don't own the complete copy, but it's Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. Yes, did you know there is a traditional Banjo-Kazooie game on the GBA? It's set 2 months after the events of the first game on the N64. It's kind of an isometric 3D platformer with a focus on collecting a bunch of stuff. There's 5 worlds in your very Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie fashion. And what's fascinating about that game is that originally developed by Rare, I think they started development in around 1999, and it was supposed to release on the Game Boy Color, but I think development maybe took a little bit too long, and eventually they ended up shifting development into the Game Boy Advance. So really neat little isometric 3D platformer, Banjo-Kazooie, one of my favorite series ever, one of my favorite 3D platformers ever. So looking forward to hopefully playing that on the Analog Pocket here this year. Next up, it's time to kick off the dust on the PlayStation Vita and play Tearaway. A little paper mache style 3D platformer, one that has been sitting unplayed for far too long. I think a criminally underrated little platformer. I think there's even been a sequel on PlayStation 4 where they at least ported and kind of remastered this Vita game to the PlayStation 4. So I'd still like to play it on the Vita because I've heard it makes excellent use of the features on the little system. And so would really love to kind of sneak this game on at some point this year. So if you've played Tearaway, let me know. But I think this is Media Molecule, if I'm not mistaken, who made the Little Big Planet games. I could be wrong, but fantastic, beautiful looking paper mache little 3D platformer. Yeah, from the creators of Little Big Planet. It's right in the box there, Rusty. But yeah, would love to sneak that in this year. Continuing the theme of platformers, we have Yoshi's Woolly World on the 3DS. I hope they end up porting the Wii U version to the Switch because I'd prefer to play the console version versus the 3DS version if I could. But I was so upset with Crafted World on the Switch. I thought one of the worst soundtracks for a Nintendo platformer. I mean it is so bad. It sounds like they hired some third grader to play the recorder for the entirety of the game, and it's like the same track that seems to be on loop for the entirety of that game. It's a decent platformer from a gameplay perspective. It's a little too simple for my liking, but the music is just like grating on the ears. But I remember getting a 3DS for my wife when we were in college before we were married, and I remember getting her a copy of Animal Crossing New Leaf and this game here, and she loved this game. It was so fun watching her play it, collecting all the different Yoshi outfits. So really easy on the mind, cutesy 2D side-scrolling platformer. Need to definitely knock this off the backlog at some point, so why not add it to the list of games I want to play this year. And then we have an unopened sealed game and a series that I don't think got a lot of traction here in the West, but I think is more successful in Japan, and that is Yokai Watch, or Yokai Watch. Kind of a little slice of life RPG where you kind of collect these little yokai monsters and use them in combat. And I've never gotten around to playing any of these games. This is the only game in the series that I own, but I'd like to definitely break the seal on this one and give it a try this year because it seems to be a pretty relaxing, easygoing, turn-based RPG where you collect these little monsters, run around the world, and use them in combat. So the last game, also on the 3DS, that I don't own a physical copy of because it was exclusive to the eShop, and that is Attack of the Friday Monsters, which is also kind of a slice-of-life game where you're playing as this young boy in the 1970s. It takes place in Tokyo, where you're living in the suburbs, and you're kind of wandering around this neighborhood, talking to friends, and eventually, on Friday nights, you and your friends go and observe these kaiju monsters. So think like old school Godzilla and Mothra fighting. And I don't even know if there's any combat in the game. I just know that folks that I've watched on YouTube for years, like TV and Lust, was very fond of this game when it was released. My good friend Blinkoom, it was one of his favorite games that he played last year. Again, exclusive to the eShop. Now that the eShop is closed, you probably can't get a copy of it legally anymore, but you could revert to other ways to play it. But I was thankful to snag a copy of it and download it before the eShop closed. So hoping to play that this year as well. So again, a nice bundle of games across console and handheld. Some RPGs, some platformers, all in all, not too terribly long games. I want to set myself up for success I think if I added stuff like Breath of the Wild or Xenoblade Chronicles or these other games that take a tremendous amount of time, Persona 5, I wouldn't even pick them up, right? Especially now that I have a child, I'm going back to work soon. I'm really going to have to find a better balance with this hobby of playing games coming into this new year. And so I wanted to kind of give myself structure, but also set myself up for success for games that I can actually pick up and play and beat in reasonable amounts of time. But there is one final goal that I have for myself as it relates to my backlog to, again, provide me more structure when it comes to selecting the games that I want to play. And this was actually something that I did back in, I think, 2023, but I had zero success with it. So I'm hoping to have a bit more success this year. And it's kind of this idea of the rule of 5, where you select 5 games in a particular category that you want to play, and then 4 games with a different theme, and so on and so forth, 3 games in a different category, 2, and eventually 1. So what do I mean by that? Let's kind of shift gears and get back into my spreadsheet. Move myself up here. You see my gaming goals from the 5 console games and the 5 handheld there. But now we also kind of have this 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 for gaming goals for this year. So I said at the top, I have way too many games on my Switch backlog, unplayed or unfinished. I could not justify a Switch 2 purchase until I start chipping away at this backlog more. So I've kind of rattled off a few games for each of these categories. And again, to kind of give myself that structure and make the decision for me, because I know decision paralysis Rusty here deeper into the year is not going to be able to look at his wall of red cases and make those decisions for himself at that time. So Pikmin 4, Disney Illusion Island, Mario Odyssey, we already talked about, Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe, that remaster of the Wii game, and new Pokemon Snap. 5 Switch games covering a variety of genres that I think all would be great choices for me to play this year. All games I've been meaning to play since I picked them up, but just haven't gotten around to them. So those are the 5 Switch games that I'd like to knock off the backlog this year if I can. Switching to kind of an old school retro category, I kind of said like essentially PS3 and Xbox 360 and before, which some people probably are not mentally in a place where they want to dub and label the Xbox 360, Wii, and PS3 as retro. But to kind of put things in perspective, I think we're about to celebrate the 20th anniversary release of the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii. So if back in 2008, 2010, we were saying that the N64 and Super Nintendo were retro, and those had released like 15 to 20 years prior, I think it's about time we also start saying that the Xbox 360 and PS3 is kind of teetering on the retro naming convention, if you will. So anyways, old school games that I'd like to play this year, Time Splitters 2. I'm talking about the kind of port that was recently released on PlayStation 4 and 5. I ended up picking up that on sale on PSN. Old school mission objective based first person shooter, very much your perfect dark GoldenEye type of game. I've already started that, very much enjoying it. Love the original Max Payne. I'd like to play Max Payne 2 and 3, although I might swap a different game in there since those Max Payne remakes I think are coming out here in the next year or two. Banjo-Tooie. On the subject of Banjo-Kazooie, I've never played the sequel. Ever. Can you believe it? We've got a Banjo-Kazooie poster back there. I have a whole shelf over here dedicated to Banjo-Kazooie merchandise. And I've never played the second game. So hopefully, here in 2025, we course correct and finally play and maybe beat that game. Alpha Protocol. Another really interesting kind of third-person action RPG. I might be mistaken, but I feel like that one, if it's not developed by BioWare, it's another similar developer. I have that back there on PS3 that I'd like to finally play. I want to beat more indie games this year, so I added 3 to my list here. Abzu, Death's Door, and Sayonara Wild Hearts. 3 that I think are held in very high regard in the indie community that love indie games. And I also thought about recording myself playing Abzu and uploading that Let's Play to my YouTube channel, because folks really enjoyed my experience playing through Journey, so maybe it could be fun to also do the same with Abzu. So 3 indie games, those are the 3 that I selected. 2 RPGs. Nier Replicant is one of them. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, where you play through the entire Dragon Ball Z saga. One I've started and stopped a number of different times. I'd love to play that game to completion. The Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. I've not played Final Fantasy 3 through 6 ever, so would like to maybe chip away at some of those this year. And where I think a lot of this is possible, particularly on the indie game and RPG front, is playing and making use of the Portal more, the PlayStation Portal, which I know people dogged on a lot when it was released, but recently I've been making my way through quite a bit of Hogwarts Legacy using that device, and it is running buttery smooth. Like, kind of shocking, especially since you're streaming it from the console and not playing a native port of the game like you would on something like the Steam Deck. And I think that device is really going to help me to chip away at my backlog more this year, especially now that my daughter's going to be going to daycare. Again, it's going to just be introducing a lot more life change for me, trying to find a balance between my hobbies, gaming and otherwise. I think that Portal and the Switch, for that matter, will kind of be more conducive to dad life and chipping away at the backlog. So hoping to get through those this year. And then a new series, just one game, doesn't matter what it is, could be Yakuza. I've never finished a Yakuza game before. Metal Gear Solid, never finished an MGS game before. Golden Sun, a beloved RPG series. I've never played a Golden Sun game, and I have all 3 of them on GBA and DS. So those are all the games. I want to anchor back to what I said at the very beginning. I'm probably not going to beat all of these games. I might not beat 50% of these games, but what it will help me do is to curb the amount of time that I spend staring at my shelf, going on my digital library for Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, or Steam, and it will hopefully provide that structure that will focus my attention on playing the games instead of thinking about games I'd like to play, or bouncing around from one game to the next and not committing to a particular game. So that is ultimately the main goal for this year, is to play more and think about playing less. So hopefully these ideas maybe provide you with some ideas of how you want to chip away and focus on your backlog and playing and finishing your games this year. Definitely let me know in the comment section below. What are some goals you have for yourself? What are the types of games that you're hoping to chip away and beat in your backlog this year? I'd love to hear from you down below. I think what I'll probably do is check in on a quarterly basis here on the channel to kind of make note of any progress I've made or lack of progress. So we'll probably come back in about 3 months to see how I'm doing, chipping away at the backlog. And of course, there'll be a variety of videos in between talking about the games I'm playing and of course picking up. But I want to thank all of you so much for watching this video. Once again, let me know down in the comment section below what some of your goals for your backlog this year are, and we will see you in my next video.